Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, and my dear friends, I thank TEDxKrea University and their wonderful team for inviting me today for this flagship event. Krea University is a center of excellence, and it's indeed a great pleasure to be here and speak on reimagining the world order from contradiction to collaboration. The world order, as we have known in the last several decades, is unraveling. When you look around, you realize that international laws, international rules and agreements, which have enjoyed universal adherence, are being violated with impunity and without accountability. You see that in Gaza and in Ukraine. But you also see that elsewhere, for example, in Sudan or in Haiti. But many of us are just watching it happen, either deliberately or helplessly. Military and forcible armed takeovers, whether in our neighborhood or in Africa, or attempts to regime change in the Middle East or in Africa or in Latin America, have almost become par for the course. The irony is that some of these are being done in the name of bringing in democracy. Terrorism by state and non-state actors is only increasing, especially in Africa and Asia. When the world turned a blind eye to terrorism in Asia, these terrorists hit the heart of Manhattan in 2001, leading to worldwide outrage. We now ignore terrorism in Africa at our own peril. No one with a conscience can see what is happening in Gaza without feeling outraged, whether the terrorist attack of Hamas on Israel and the brutal hostage taking by them, or the massive Israeli retaliation and killings of Palestinian civilians and children, not just in Gaza, but now spreading across the West Bank. But the world watches silently the erosion of value and sanctity of human life. I have lived in Gaza, and I know what it means. Ceasefire is the need of the hour, whether in Gaza or in Ukraine, but no party has any intention of agreeing to one. Further, wars around the world have become proxy wars. Supremacy of the forms of governance and value systems is sought to be settled on the battlefield. Everything has been weaponized, and the unilateral sanctions are causing developing countries tremendous distress with respect to food, energy, oil, fertilizers, finance, etc. And in the midst of all this, the world is being divided on religious lines, fueling religiophobia. We not only see Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and Christianophobia, but we also see the rise of religiophobia against non-Abrahamic religions, including hate crimes against the Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and others. But the problem is even deeper. The big powers are presenting the world with two differing and even opposing worldviews and values. One led by the United States and its allies, and the other by China and its allies. The two sides are fighting for domination, and countries are being asked to take sides. It's a throwback to Cold War days and rival blocs. Developing nations have become mere bystanders when the world order is unraveling. Friends, in addition to the challenges I've just mentioned, which are national or regional, there is another dimension, the global dimension. Many of the challenges now need global solutions, not just regional or national solutions. Climate change and environment, energy, sustainable development, technology, especially cyber, outer space, the oceans, and of course, pandemics like COVID-19. These are all bigger than what a single nation state can deal with. And instead of collaborating, we are working to protect our narrow, selfish interests. For example, in climate change, majority of the countries are those who never contributed to climate change but are facing the maximum adverse impact from it. Are the developed countries on course to meet their mitigation targets? If not, can we hold them accountable? Will they adhere to the principles of equity and climate justice? Or pay for the adaptation measures of small island states, which may well disappear with sea level rise? The answer to all of them is no. With the march of technology, especially artificial intelligence, our dependence on technology and AI is increasing exponentially by the day. Countries are now using artificial intelligence in warfare. How would you like your sister or brother to be killed by an algorithm? Never has the need to collaborate with each other been more important, and never has the world been so divided by contradictions. Our collective future needs new solutions, whether it is regional conflicts or global challenges. It is here that India matters. In effect, the message of India is that we do not have to choose between warring blocs, however big or important they may be. We stand for a worldview which seeks the path of dialogue over war, seeks an inclusive and interconnected world over polarization and fragmentation, seeks independent of decision making over coercion of developing countries, seeks sustainable development over bleeding of our earth and environment, and seeks freedom over occupation. Friends, there is a map first published in 1867 in the Johnson's New Illustrated Family Atlas of the World in New York. The title of the map was Hindustan and Farther India. This geographical space called Farther India covers a wide arc which stretches from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan to Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Singapore, Malaysia to Vietnam. Incidentally, the atlas in which the map was published was awarded the first prize at the Universal Exposition in Paris in 1867 and in 1878. This is the mind space India occupied as recently as 150 years ago. This is an American map. This farther India did not come from conquest or just from trade and commerce. It came by Indian thoughts and ideas and knowledge, capturing the imagination of the peoples of the world over centuries. We built bridges with and for others to bring peace and security. For example, the Korean War in the early 1950s. The fact that we were barely 5 years old as an independent nation did not deter us from contributing to bringing about a resolution to that conflict. And in recognition, India was made chair of the 5-member Neutral Nations Repatriations Commission. We were good at it then, and we are good at it now. Friends, India has always stood for independence of decision making and building bridges with those who differ from us through our civilization and history. We have a plethora of extraordinary texts over centuries on various aspects of statecraft and foreign policy. Our leaders have sought to apply them to real-life situations, including famously the use of ahimsa and satyagraha by Mahatma Gandhi during our independence movement. Let us not forget the contribution of Buddhist thought to our collective thinking, including the diplomatic outreach of Emperor Ashoka, or the knowledge outreach of the great Nalanda University, or the symbolic outreach of the Buddhist Panchsheel embodied in the India-China Agreement of 1954. We never lost our ability to think independently even when we were a colony. At the turn of our independence, we called it non-alignment. Now, accosted with two different worldviews, we are doing much of the same, refusing to join either camp, even if we engage with both. We call this strategic autonomy. In fact, it is our abstention on the votes on the Ukraine war, in the United Nations, which acted as a catalyst in helping other bigger developing countries to take an independent stand and voice their dissatisfaction on a military solution being pursued and call for dialogue. Autonomy of decision making is an essential ingredient of reimagining the world order. More and more countries are shunning blocs and bloc politics. Let us not forget that the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran was in front of China, while the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which would have been in front of the United States but for the Gaza war. We will see more of this multi-alignment in the future. Further, decisions need to be relevant to all countries, not just a few. This is critical for smaller countries in the global south, which derive their collective voice from institutions with universal participation like the United Nations. That's their insurance. For them, decision making has to be democratic and inclusive. At the end of the day, small groups or plurilateral bodies of big guys, however well-intentioned they may be, still cannot claim to represent the will of the international community, even if it is as influential as the G20. And that is why India convened the Voice of the Global South Summit soon after taking over the presidency of the G20, and we also got the African Union into G20 to make sure that the decisions of G20 are not distanced from reality. If we need to reduce power play in international relations, that will come from universally representative organizations and not necessarily from groups like G20 or G7, which essentially serve the interests of the smaller group they represent. Friends, almost all current problems, whether in the UN, the WTO, IMF, or the World Bank, have arisen because one set of countries want to preserve the 1945 architecture, since it has benefited them all these years. But to reflect current changed balance of power, whether political or economic or financial, another set of countries demand reform, like India. We have called for reform multilateralism. I am saying this fully conscious of the fact that international institutions like the United Nations have made our world a better place to live in. But today, we are questioning the status quo of 1945. And that's why India has been at the forefront to reform the UN Security Council. When the UN was established, there were 51 member states. Now we have 193. But we still have only 5 permanent members who are polarized and have paralyzed decision-making in the Security Council. For decades, conflicts remain unresolved on the Council's agenda. When I was the Indian ambassador to the United Nations, when India was in the UN Security Council between 2021 and 22, I had to deal with the same conflicts which my predecessor 10 years earlier dealt with when India was in the Council. These conflicts will remain unresolved unless there is a permanent representation of the global South, especially that of the largest country, India, and the continent of Africa. And whenever the Council is reformed, I have no doubt that India will be a permanent member. On international peace and security, let us understand something very simple. We cannot secure ourselves by making another country insecure, whether individually or collectively. Security is not a zero-sum game. Otherwise, we will end up with another Ukraine or Gaza. Security also cannot come from redrawing of borders unilaterally, whether land or maritime borders, or from continued occupation. Further, we should not accept any justification for terror attacks and condone them. We need a genuine collective security architecture. A new world order will be meaningless if it cannot provide for development, progress, and gender equality. If we have to provide for development, especially in health and education, as well as achieve sustainable development goals and the Paris climate goals, then deploying of cutting-edge technology and harnessing technology for public good will have to be integral to achieving these goals. Technology with ethics to curb its misuse, technology with regulation to curb its risks, and a robust technology governance structure are essential. India is uniquely poised to provide technology solutions, and we just cannot afford to miss the bus. Friends, if indeed we need to reimagine the world order, we need to, at the very least, look at expansion of strategic autonomy of decision making, at striving to make decision making democratic and inclusive, at reforms of multilateralism to reflect the reality of greater multipolarity, at not treating security as a zero-sum game, and at deploying cutting-edge technology for development and progress, keeping at all times respect for human life at the center of our foreign policies. There are enough people in this world who indulge in horrible acts under the guise of seeking justice or in the name of democracy or human rights. But there are not enough people who are willing to pursue peace by finding mutually acceptable solutions and respecting human life. I thank TEDxKrea University once again for giving me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts in this flagship event. I thank you.